Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this. Faked you out because this is SoftClock3. So the deal with SoftClock3 is this is a tempo reference. And today it's all about tempos of various kinds. For instance, what does the Beatles song Hey Bulldog and the ZZ Top song Give Me All Your Lovin' have in common? Well, among other things, those are the two songs that I'm putting out, one as a forbidden music and one for $10 and up patrons, so you can hear what they do. But they also have a very similar tempo in a certain kind of way. So what I've got here in my little notes is that Hey Bulldog is about 102 BPM. Give Me All Your Lovin' is 120, because I checked it, I measured. Thing is, these tempos have a thing in common based on like these little tempo references that I made. This is from some years back. I've been working on this for a while. And the idea is the way the tempo thing works, there's sort of four basic flavors of tempo between the polarities of maximally relaxed and maximally tense. The maximally tense ones, I assigned words like forceful and trample and cranked and so on. They're very jittery and tense. The relaxed ones, I assigned names like stable, flow, relaxed, weightless at a higher tempo. And they kind of flow. You don't want to be too jittery with them. They naturally sit in a more relaxed kind of zone. And the thing those tempos I mentioned have in common is that they are kind of in the groove zone and maybe a little to the more intense. So we turn this back on again, and you'll see that it is set to 140 beats per minute. For SoftClock, this is actually a kind of jittery tempo. It's moving rather quickly. If you had to move your hands or your arms the way that frequency is wobbling, I can even exaggerate it with this control called flavor. Or dial it back until it doesn't have variations to it. It's just a steady pulse. We'll set it back to about halfways. Oh, by the way, we also have triplet. Everything else still applies. Triplet only does on or off. And we've got tuple, and we've got count. We're doing an 8 here. So what happens as we back 140, which is cranked, down to 130, which is the opposite kind of flavor for how the tempo moves? I'll show you. And I'm not quite getting to 130 exactly, but we're in the vicinity. The relaxed tempos have sort of a wave motion to them. We don't have that sudden swerve to the sound. Same applies for triplet. And the idea with this tempo reference is that you're going to track it down to a recording. You don't leave this plugin sitting there because it won't necessarily be referring to the same thing. You print it to a track. But then we can continue to manipulate this. So say we'll go to that 120 BPM for Give Me All Your Lovin'. Well, this is the maximally forceful. This is the aggressive zone for the tempo flavors. And we pull it back a little bit more. And it's still got a certain amount of juice. Now, if you pull it back 2 beats per minute from that, you have 118, which I've categorized as groove. Notice how it has a different flavor now. If you wanted a faster groove, 135 BPM also counts as a faster groove. Same basic feel, same ability to do triplets if you wanted. But the flavor of how it's kind of moving sits about the same. And if we drop down to what Hey Bulldog had, which was, I've called this tempo testify. 102 I call testify. Notice where it sits in terms of where these vibrations go. 102. And we've got some of that vibe to it. There's a bit of a snap to the effect. If we want to go even harder at this slow tempo, we'll go to 106. I've called that trample. And it continues to go to very slow or very fast. 189 I had as, there are some other references to this as well, which is that with our faster tempos, or there's yet another, I've showed you the most relaxed form, I've showed you the intense aggressive form, which is of course 140, 160, 122, 183. But there is another zone I haven't showed you yet, and that is the one that I call swagger. And it sits at 110, 95, 126, 145. I did the math around all of this, but this is Airwindows math, right? This doesn't really relate to anything. It's experiments that I've been doing. So don't think you're going to be able to look this up or ask an AI about it or anything like, because it has no idea. This is stuff I'm making up. But if we go to the swagger setting, and for instance, we could go to triplets as well if we want. That is the one that I literally called swagger was 110. So let's go to 110. Looks like I can do 109 or 111. That's unfortunate, but actually if I resize this window, I bet it would let me do. And there you go. It is assigning a SoftClock flavor to everything that it does using internal calculations without you having to set it or remember it or anything like that. And of course, you also get to do stuff like things like odd time signatures. Now, I've got some updates that I have in mind for doing odd time signatures. But here we have a, we can go to the 140 or indeed dial that back. Let's dial it to a groove zone, which is nevertheless a rather fast tempo. And we'll call that 135. Or thereabouts. Again, if I made this window slightly larger, I'd be able to pick anything I wanted, but I've got it small so that I can record it. This is in Reaper, so it does this. My plugins in the generic form do not spell out any of the controls, so I have no control over whether it lets me do that. It let me say BPM at the end of this one, but that's it. Also, the VST shows you things in count here, which is if we go to like the setting 19, this is actually counting out a 17. It's a 17.8, or if you wanted, it could be a 17.16. Let's go back to the 8. And we've got various counts for how those beats are arranged. So if you go to, say, 20, that's making the sort of internal divisions of the 17 be arranged slightly differently. I would say experiment with this. I'm going to work on continuing to develop this so that there are more controls for being able to specify exactly how the odd time is supposed to go. But of course, we can always just go back to 8. And now it's a simple metronome. And of course, tuple is telling you what subdivision to use from 0 to 1, and it's still counting 8 for each of those. So what you can do with this is, say you've got 8 and you're counting 8 like this. Now we are going to 9. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We can set the tuple to 9 as well. That's a 9 over the 8 that we had before. It's set it so that it will do a count of 8, and then if you have this set up, this will also do a count of 9 over the same thing. So if you track something over this, and then just slide it in the arrange window correctly, you can line it up over a 8 with the tuple being an 8th note, or indeed, if say you went to like 5. That's over the same thing as the 8. So there are many possibilities here as far as laying down tracks to a time reference. And then if they're not all perfectly synchronized, we'll do it in another section of the arrange window and then make it coincide with what you're trying to aim for, or do a separate groove in a different time signature and just splice them. And it'll be behaving like it's essentially the same groove and will line up with anything that you did over the previous time reference. It's just that this is not referring to a machine time based into the DAW or quantizing to anything. Instead, it's just grooving to whatever this wavery sound is. So in theory, you dial in a vibe. Here, we'll put this back to the 140 again. This is about the tensest you can get this vibe to go. And if you can play along with the swing like this, you can play along with any number of other swings and timings along with whatever beat per minute you're at, and arrange or layer those things in the DAW and be able to construct whatever you want out of that. You don't really have to sequence this or anything. You just have to go like, okay, let's go into a 5, but it's on the same time signature and the same basic groove. Well, you could simply go to a 5 with the same pulse. But if you wanted the overall length of the bar to be the same, you'd switch to this. It's a completely different feel, but it's going to take the same amount of time for your overall count for the bar. And there you have it. So the idea of SoftClock is, and has always been, make something where you can groove along to something that is not a click. Because I feel like clicks are not necessarily easy or comfortable to groove along with. They're very unforgiving, and sometimes the ones that are most sought after by studio musicians and DAWs and things like that are the ones that are the most unforgiving. And I feel like ones like this, where it has a physical feel of motion, of entrainment to it, is more effective at sort of grooving along to. And the options I have in there allow for doing all kinds of weird things with timing, as if you magically knew the difference between playing in 8 and then switching to a 5 that took the same time as the 8, and all that Frank Zappa Black Page type stuff that you could do is now stuff you could do in the DAW by just grooving along to a wavering noise. And the idea from this is to make something where you could groove along sort of humanishly, making music without mechanizing and sequencing it, in the belief that doing that, especially doing it with a performance going all the way through the song, so you have the feeling of the musical intention continuing through every instrument and voice that's doing that, rather than being pieced together out of little chunks. This is probably something that you can do to stay ahead of the AIs, because they're not going to be able to do it. They're trained on decades of deeply produced and artificially manufactured music. So it's a way of dealing with that. Although I will point out one further thing, which is I talk about making human music, doing something like SoftClock. And yeah, I went through not long ago and went to all the songs I had that were any good, including ones that I'd written back when I was like 17, and found suitable tempos for them all by like drumming along to them and using these kinds of references. Like, do I feel that it should be a cranked tense kind of feeling? If so, that limits the number of tempos that I can use. I could have a fast tempo, but it might be a very relaxed fast tempo. And all that is very interesting and the sort of thing that makes me want to start recording these very human songs. But you know, this is also something AI can't do very well. If you ever wondered what those blinky lights do, now you know. And that is also something that AIs will struggle to be able to do, because if you're going to be playing with sequencers, you might as well be playing with the kinds of sequencers that use timing pulses rather than MIDI or diffusion models. I've heard what diffusion models try to do when they're attempting to make like trance or whatever, and it's really pretty pathetic. Turns out even machines can be better than machines at music making if that's the style that you like. So there you go. SoftClock for if you want to groove human performances along with something and have a sense of presence that is beyond what AI can consistently convey because it's building things out of diffusion models. Or just play with the machines. Their timing pulses can be so accurate that there is a clarity of timing that can't be represented with the AIs. Either way, it's whatever you like. On that note, I will get back to work because I've got lots of stuff to do, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.